Beruchim and Nimsaim, ladies. Welcome. We are studying today Parashat Balak. Our parasha is famous. It's a famous episode that we read every year about the king of Moab, a fellow by the name of Balak, who had some type of merit, this king, that he has a parasha that's named after him. We shouldn't take that lightly. It's a big thing to have your name as the headline of a parasha, Parashat Balak. And I want you to know he wasn't a good man. He was a notorious anti-Semite. So much did he hate the Jewish people, he went out and he hired another notorious anti-Semite, a fellow by the name of Balak, who was a prophet of the Goyim. Supposedly, our rabbis tell us, he was a great prophet. He rivaled Moshe Rabbeinu in prophecy. But again, his hatred was so great for the Jewish people, he was very easily coaxed into accepting an offer for a lot of money, mind you. Money is able to change people's minds very easily. And he accepted an offer to go and curse the Jewish people. When I say curse the Jewish people, I mean to say his intention was to annihilate them in totality. He had a certain ability to know exactly what words to say and when to say them. And he was going to say them on top of a mountain, looking at the Jewish people. And if he would succeed, the Jewish people would no longer exist. I want you to know, in our history, this was one of the most dangerous situations that we ever found ourselves in. Where there was a prophet standing on a mountain that knew the right words to say when to say them. Am Yisrael was in great peril, in great danger. Baruch Hashem, his plan got foiled, and he failed miserably. Instead of cursing us, he actually blessed us. So at the end, everybody lived happily ever after. But there's a great musar, a great lesson in this story. And you have to know the background in order to appreciate it. This was not just a mere act of anti-Semitism. Throughout our history, there have come against us rivals and enemies that have sworn themselves to our destruction. This shouldn't be news to anybody that somebody hates the Jews. Every single day, in every single generation, there's been always somebody that's been committed to our annihilation. So there's another story, Balak, Bilam, two more gangsters that came along and tried to rid the world of Jewry. But it's a much deeper story. You have to know, our Torah allows and accepts conversions. Now, I'm not talking about our community, so don't confuse that. We're talking in Torah level. If a ger tzedek, a righteous convert, wants to be part of the Jewish nation, we accept that, according to the Torah. However, there are two nations that our Torah goes out of its way to say you are forbidden to come into the people. You can convert, but we cannot marry you. You are forbidden to marry into pure Jewish families. And who are those two nations? The nations of Ammon and Moab. And I want to explain it to you. Why are these two nations on the bad list? They're on the no-fly list. Borei Olam says it's unacceptable. Any other nation, if they convert, we can deal with them. But these two nations, God has them on a bad list. Ammon and Moab. What did they do so bad? Why are they so terrible? What does God have against these two nations? A goy is a goy, so what's the difference where he comes from? It seems Ammon and Moab are much worse. Why? Let me explain it to you. Because when the Jewish people were coming out of Egypt, so we were walking through the desert, and we happened to pass by the civilization of Ammon. You know, we're traveling in the desert. There's nobody living in the desert, but on the sidelines, there were nations that were living. So we happened to cross the Ammon region. And nobody from Ammon came out to greet us. That's not a sin. You don't need a welcoming committee. I mean, there's no Avon for them to come out and greet us. But they didn't come and offer us provisions, food and drink. You have a nation of 3 million people in the desert. There's men, women, and children. There's got to be somebody that's hungry, somebody that's thirsty. And Ammon, the nation, did not even come out and give us a piece of bread. They didn't even give us a glass of water. They are the epitome of somebody that is inhospitable. But you're going to say to yourselves, the 3 million people, that's a lot of tuna fish sandwiches. How do you expect the people of Ammon to go out and feed an entire nation? That's asking them a lot. And our rabbis tell us, no, we didn't ask them to give it to us for free. But they didn't even go out to sell it to us. Which means they could have opened up kiosks on the sidelines of the desert, and they could have sold us water, just like today they sell water. They could have opened up a water stand. They could have made profit. They could have sold us sandwiches. They could have sold us food. But they hated us so much that they didn't even want to profit on us. There's such a venom, such a poisonous hatred against us. They didn't even want to give us food for a price. Our sworn enemy, the people of Ammon. But I ask you a question. So is that why you punish them? Because they're inhospitable? Because they don't want to give us food? Is that the real reason why God put them on a list that we cannot accept them? So I'm going to tell you the depth. If that's all that they did, God could have tolerated it. And God maybe could have even forgiven them. But now let me give you the history that you don't know. You know who Ammon's father was? That nation of Ammon, they had a father. Their father was a fellow called Lot. Oh, you remember Lot? Abraham's nephew, Lot? Lot had a son. One of his sons' names was Ammon. Now you know, ladies, Lot lived in a city called Sodom. Sodom was a terrible city of wicked people, the Sha'im. So wicked that God destroyed the entire city, including Lot's wife. She actually turned into a pillar of salt. Some say they can go to Israel today and see that pillar of salt. I haven't seen it myself, but I know what salt looks like. I'm not going to say anything special. But the point is, Lot was saved. Lot was saved. Why was he saved? You know what our rabbis tell us? Not on his own merit. He didn't deserve to be saved. But he was saved in the merit of his righteous uncle, Avraham Avinu. And Avraham made a trip to Sodom and he actually saved Lot from the destruction. And therefore Lot owes his existence to Avraham. And now Lot has a son, Ammon. And Ammon meets up with the Jewish people. They should have had gratitude to us. After all, if it wasn't for our grandfather Abraham, their father Lot would be dead. And if Lot was dead, they wouldn't have an existence. And therefore, simple gratitude. You owe us. That's a debt. Simple derech eretz. You have to reciprocate. Our nation, you owe us. What are we asking for? We're not asking for $1 million. We're not asking for an ornate gift of jewelry of some sort. We're asking for simple provisions that will pay for. And Ammon was the epitome, the paradigm of what we call an ingrate. Of somebody that a favor that was done to them, and they don't know how to reciprocate. In our Torah's eyes, that is one of the worst traits. Where you do somebody a favor and they show no gratitude. Where they don't feel obligated. Where they don't feel a need to give something back. That was Ammon. Not only didn't they give back, they went against us, they tried to hurt us. God says that trait, inhospitality, being inhospitable, I could tolerate. But being ungrateful, out of all people, you, Ammon, you're not going to give food to our people. If it wasn't for our father, your father would have been dead. You don't think that you owe us something? God says you're banned from our nation. But ladies, Lot had another son. Lot's second son, his name was Moab. Well, Moab is also banned from our nation. Why, what did they do so bad? Well, Balak, this week's Parashat, Balak was the king of Moab. And what did Balak, the king of Moab, do, as I explained to you earlier? He hired Bilam to curse the Jewish people. That means Balak was set out to commit a Holocaust. Nothing short than a genocide. The annihilation of an entire race. And the Torah comes along and says, Balak, you ingrate. Your father was Moab. Your grandfather was Lot. If it wasn't for the Jewish people, you wouldn't be alive today. After all, it was our father Abraham that saved your grandfather Lot. Now you go along and hire somebody to kill the people that saved your life? So Balak is an ingrate. Balak should have had gratitude and said, how can I fight these people? After all, their father Abraham Avinu, we owe them. And instead he made it as if nothing happened. Therefore Balak again becomes the epitome of somebody that does not know how to show gratitude. Hence Ammon and Moab, both nations are banned. Ammon that did not come out and greet us and give us food, and Moab that hired Bilam to curse us. But I want to go a little further in our history, ladies. You'll learn a little stories of the Tanakh today. It won't hurt you. It's not so bad. Listen to a lesson I'm going to teach you now. How many years passed? Listen to what I'm going to tell you now. How many years passed from when Abraham saved Lot to the time that Balak hired Bilam? How many years passed from that time? If you look at the history, 400 years passed. Our rabbis are telling us, even though 4 centuries of history passed, the debt of gratitude lasts forever. Which means you shouldn't think, well, he saved us 400 years ago. Statute of limitations. Finished. We don't know anything anymore. It's past already. Which means if you did me a favor yesterday, oh good, I can owe you. Tomorrow I'll do you a favor back. Even 5 years later, 10 years later, but this is 400 years later. Abraham saved Lot. It was old history. The Torah says, once somebody does you a favor, you're indebted to that family forever and ever. The debt never ceases. And therefore when Balak went to hire Bilam, he was probably thinking, oh yeah, you're right. These people, their father did my family a favor. But that's 400 years ago. That's bygones already. It's past. Our Torah says nothing doing. A favor is a favor. And there's no expiration date. Now let me tell you a story in the Tanakh. You must know this story. There was a time in our history where the Davidic dynasty, that's the dynasty that comes from David HaMelech alav shalom, was in jeopardy. There was a rotten, terrible king called Ahav, and he was committed to kill any living descendant from the family of David HaMelech. He tried to destroy that holy family, but God would not let it happen, because if that family gets destroyed, there goes Mashiach. Mashiach comes from that family. And it got to such a critical point, there was only one survivor left. And his name was Yehoash. Little boy. The sole survivor from the family of David. But they had to hide this little boy. Because if he would be exposed, they'd kill him as well. So there was a Kohen Gadol at the time. His name was Yehoyada. You don't have to remember these names, but it wouldn't hurt you if you remembered the names. These are important stories. It's good to know the personalities. Yehoyada was the Kohen Gadol. What did he do? He took this little baby Yehoash and he hid him. Hide and go seek. Where did he hide him? You're not going to believe it. In the Holy of Holies. In the Kodesh Kodashim. He put the little baby with his pamper, or little baby bottle, and he snuggled him up in a little carriage, a little bassinet, and he put him in the Holy of Holies. Now, you know what a miracle that is? The Kohen Gadol is able to go into the Holy of Holies once a year. And he has to prepare, and he has to purify himself, and even with all that, it's very dangerous. There have been hundreds of Kohanim that went into the Holy of Holies but did not come out. Because it is so sensitive, that place, that if God forbid the Kohen has a wrong thought, or he has a small sin, the Holy of Holies will not tolerate it. That's why I told you many times, when the Kohen would go into the Kodesh Kodashim, they used to tie a rope to his ankle. In the event that he would die in the Holy of Holies, they had to pull him out. Because nobody can go in to get him. Even the angels are not allowed to go into the Holy of Holies. And here, this little baby Yehoash is being hidden in the Holy of Holies. How long was he there for? 6 years. Could you imagine he lived in the Kodesh Kodashim for 6 years? This is a place over here that, like I'm telling you, it's such a place of danger. And here he made it. And who was giving him food for those 6 years? His rabbi, the Kohen Gadol, Yehoyada. Every day Yehoyada would come, make sure he had food to eat, send him a pamper. I guess he had to go to the bathroom as well. It's an amazing thing. He lived in the Holy of Holies. It's not to be believed. At the young age, the tender age of 7, the hide-and-go-seek game was over. Yehoash was able to come out of hiding. All the enemies disappeared. And now, at the age of 7, he became the king of Israel. The youngest king ever in our history. Little boy, 7 years old. Just think of your kids. Imagine 7 years old. I don't know, was that 2nd grade, 3rd grade? The king of Israel. I don't know exactly how that worked. So what happened? Listen to the story. We didn't start the story yet. The people were marveled by this man, Yehoash. They couldn't believe it. Such a young boy. And they knew his history, that he lived in the Holy of Holies for 6 years. So you know what they started to tell him? Yehoash, you must be God. I must be God. What are you talking about? I must be God. I'm not God. No, you're God. Why do you say I'm God? You lived in the Holy of Holies for 6 years. That's an impossibility. There's no odds on that. The Kohen Gadol, Bezori, can go in 1 minute on Kippur, and you lived in it for 6 years. You're God. Well, initially he didn't believe it, but I'm going to tell you a secret. When you tell somebody something over and over again, eventually you come to believe even the most ludicrous things, especially if somebody comes and tells you you're God, and they're going to worship you and that you're a deity. At the end of the day, they convinced Yehoash that he indeed was God. It's unbelievable. Now he's walking around saying, I'm God. Look what happened over here. Well, there was a prophet. There was a prophet at the time, his name was Zechariah. Zechariah got up in front of all the people and said, Rabotai, this man is not God. He's a mortal human being. And even though he lived in the Holy of Holies for 6 years, that's because God protected him. We have no choice. If he would have died, there'd be no more line of the Davidic dynasty. He's a mortal human being. It's asur, it's forbidden to worship him. And Zechariah was making very strong speeches. So guess what Yehoash, the young king, did to Zechariah? Right? Isn't Yehoash God? So God can do anything he wants. He had Zechariah the prophet murdered. He killed him. In cold blood. The Gemara actually says the blood of Zechariah was hot blood. His blood was boiling for many years after. It was a terrible sin. But now I'm going to give you a secret. Zechariah wasn't just any prophet. Do you know who Zechariah's father was? Zechariah's father was a man called Yehoyada, the one that raised Yehoash in the Holy of Holies. That father, that Tzaddik Yehoyada, he hid Yehoash, he fed him, he tended him, he protected him. And look what happened. Years later comes that same Yehoash and he kills Yehoyada's son. So this wasn't a regular murder. This was a murder of being so ungrateful. How could you murder the son of the one that gave you life? The one that protected you? And what goes around comes around. You know what ended up happening to Yehoash? The Navi tells us he got murdered himself. Good for him, he deserved it. But the Navi tells us the names of the assassins. It's like, the one that killed Kennedy and the one that killed Lincoln. You know their names. They tell us their names. Oswald and so on and so forth. So the Navi tells us who the murderers of Yehoash were. And their names were Zeved HaAmoni and Yehozavad HaMoavi. Zeved HaAmoni and Yehozavad, the fellow from Moab. And our rabbis say, who cares where they came from? Which means, do you know where Lee Harvey Oswald descended from? Who cares? What does the Navi have to tell us their names? Well, their names is interesting. This guy's Zeved, this guy's Yehozavad. Okay, interesting. Trivia. But what does it have to go out of its way and say you should know the murderers, this guy came from Ammon and that guy came from Moab? You know what the Gemara says? Let Yehoash, the ungrateful one, that can have Zechariah, the son of his mentor, killed, let him be murdered by the two nations, Ammon and Moab, that also had no gratitude to the Jewish people. Let the ingrates kill the ingrate. Let Ammon, that did not respect what Abraham did to their father Lot, and let Moab, that tried to kill the Jewish people and did not revere what Abraham did to their father Lot by saving them, let the two ingrates come and kill Yehoash, the ingrate himself. And our rabbis tell us that our generation, we don't look at Hakarat HaTov as gratitude as the way the Torah does, unfortunately. In America we have a saying, and the saying goes something like, what have you done for me lately? Which means, yes, today you did me a favor, but after sunset it's cancelled. Now tomorrow's a new day. What did you do for me today? But yesterday I did you a favor. That was yesterday. What did you do for me today? Which means we have such short memories. And therefore, unfortunately, in our generation, it becomes a great task for children to show gratitude to their parents. Our children can't say, but today you didn't take, but I took you to the ride yesterday, but what about today? Our children have such short memories. But we went on a trip a few months ago, but where are we going tomorrow? Which means our memories to show gratitude is very limited. And our Torah is telling us, Hakarat HaTov has no end. It is infinite. We must remember if somebody did us a favor 400 years ago and helped my great-great-great-great-grandfather, I'm still bound to that family till today. But again, in a society that is so selfish, that just wants to receive and doesn't want to give back, be very careful, because our Torah cannot tolerate such a trait. It can tolerate a lot of other negative traits, but being ungrateful, the Torah says it is despicable. And God says to those two nations, Ammon and Moab, you are banned. You cannot enter our people. How dare you try to annihilate the Jewish people? You're not just like any other anti-Semite. You're an anti-Semite that should have had gratitude at least. Your hatred should have been tempered because of what our father did to your father. We saved your life. But we go a little further. I'm going to try to explain to you a concept now, ladies, and again I'm taking a risk what I'm going to do now. The first concept today that we talk about is gratitude. This is a very easy concept. All of you can appreciate it. That means gratitude to your parents, gratitude to your spouses, and marriage as well. What did you do for me today? What did you buy me today? Where are we going tonight? Yeah, but look at all the... No. It's all in the present. Hakarat HaTov to your associates, to your neighbors. This is a very important yesod. Gratitude. That's something you have to teach your children. You're invited to go to somebody's house. It has to be hakarat hatov. That you shouldn't walk into somebody's house without a gift if they invite you. But again, in the society that takes it for granted, of course I have to go. Of course they have to invite me. It's coming to me. Derech eretz, gratitude, reciprocation. And it doesn't only have to be monetary reciprocation. I'm just giving you a normal etiquette that if you go to somebody's house and they invite you, you have to bring a gift. That's gratitude. But it can be a verbal gratitude, a note. I've said in our generation we've become so spoiled in showing gratitude. And I'm not saying I probably did the same thing. My wife will remind me after the class that I'm guilty of the same thing. I'm usually guilty of everything that I speak about. So you have to know that. I'm never talking to you. I'm always talking to myself. I'm the most guilty out of all of you on these things. Used to be in the olden days, if a person received a gift, so he would send a little note, thank you very much for the gift. But today we don't want to be bothered. Today we go to the calligrapher, so they make us up 500 standard text over there. I just put it in the envelope, and if we want to be a little personal, maybe we make a little signature on it. We had enough time to open the gift. That we have time to do. We had enough time to use the gift and cherish it and appreciate it, but to say thank you, we don't be bothered. So again, it's a sensitivity. And you have to be very, very, very keen on this concept. Now this is a concept you can all understand. Showing gratitude, saying thank you, reciprocating. And even if it's something that was done years ago to your family, you should show reciprocation to the family that helped you. And if that family didn't help you, I know, for example, the Mir Yeshiva, let's say in New York, helped a lot of young men in our community many years ago at the time of the army where there was a draft. And it was a mandatory draft. It was in one of the world wars. And the yeshiva did a great favor to many of the members of our community where they enlisted them into the yeshiva as if they were studying to become rabbis. And therefore they received legal exemption from the army, which was actually saving their lives in those days. We know that a lot of people did not come back from that war. And it's wonderful to see that till today, the children and grandchildren of those people still show hakarat hatov to the yeshiva. When the yeshiva comes to solicit them for money and for funds and things like that, they remember, yes, my grandfather lived at that time and you took him in, and they make a sizable donation. That's what I'm talking about. There's a certain understanding that if something came your way, so even though it wasn't directly to you, they did it to your grandfather, but you're a result of your grandfather. You're here today because of your grandfather. So if somebody saved him, he actually saved you. And therefore you're bound. As I said, kindness is never forgotten. A debt of gratitude remains forever. So this is a concept that you can understand. It's simple. But now, please, with your permission, I want to go a little higher now, on a higher level. I didn't tell this to anybody yet. You're the first ones I'm telling it to. So if it comes out a little unclear, it's because I'm working it out in my head as well, how to say it to you. B'siyata d'shmaya. Balak, this king of Moab, was fighting against the Jewish people, not only because of anti-Semitism, because he hated us, but there was something much deeper. First of all, you have to know this man, Balak, was a man that had certain powers. He was able to see the future, as well as Bilam was. They were prophetic people. They were people that had powers, not like, don't compare them to, let's say, Assad, the king of Syria, or the president of Syria. They have no powers, these presidents. President Bush, in all due respect, he doesn't have any psychic ability. He doesn't have any supernatural powers. In the olden days, the leaders of these countries, they were powerful not only politically, but they had, you want to call it magic, you want to call it sorcery. There were certain spiritual abilities that these men were capable of having. Now Balak knew something that was very dear to him. Ladies, you know there was a great woman, maybe one of the greatest women that our religion ever produced, a lady by the name of Ruth. few months ago on Shavuot, we read the Megillat Ruth. You know, Ruth wasn't Jewish initially. She was a Goya. And her ancestry was from Moab. Do you know that Ruth was actually a great-great-granddaughter of Balak? From the same family. And she was a very holy soul. She was a precious soul. And the Zohar HaKadosh tells us that a lot of times very precious souls are held in captivity. And these souls need to be let loose out of captivity to come and join the Jewish nation. And Ruth's soul was so precious that we know she became the grandmother of King David, the great-grandmother of King Solomon, and ultimately Ruth is the great-great-great-grandmother of the Mashiach, the Messiah. That's how important she is. When we talk about important women, important ladies, she has to be, when we talk about Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, she's right up there. Without Ruth, there is no Mashiach, there is no redemption. And until this point, Ruth is in captivity. Her holy soul was in Moab, and Balak knew it. And Balak did not want to free this soul. And using his forces and his powers, he wanted to keep that soul in captivity. I'll explain it even more. The holy neshamot, they have such a, how shall I say it, they have a certain nutrients that come out of their souls, certain sustaining abilities that come out of these souls, that the wicked are able to sustain themselves off these souls. That means the fact that Ruth's neshama was on the dark side, we'll call it, it was very beneficial for Moab. That nation benefited by having that holy soul in captivity. So, what Balak was really trying to do, he wanted to kill the Jewish people because he knew one day they're going to come and take Ruth from him. And he knew that if Ruth is taken away, then the Jewish people are going to succeed, then Mashiach is going to come, then the Jews are going to be on top, they're going to build the third temple, and everything's going to be over. So actually Balak was not fighting a war in the present, he was fighting a futuristic war. He saw already the future, so therefore he said, I got to kill the Jewish people today before they come along and take the treasured soul of Ruth. It's unbelievable. Now who did Ruth actually marry eventually? She married a fellow called Boaz. Ruth and Boaz. Now let's read the pasuk itself, what it says in the Torah. I'm going to read it to you now. Listen to what the pasuk says. Vayagor Moab mepenei ha'am me'od, ki rav hu. And Balak and the people of Moab were very scared of the Jewish people. You know what they were scared of? Ki rav hu. Because they were very, give me the English word, because they were numerous. Is that so? We're not known to be the numerous nation. On the contrary, we're usually the smallest nation. Nobody's ever scared of the Jews because of our numbers. Our numbers are not intimidating. I want you to know there's about 1 billion Chinese. There's about 1.5 billion Arabs. There's only about 15 million Jews. That is a drop in the bucket compared to world population. Since when is anybody ever scared about how numerous we are? What does it mean when it says, Ki ravu? You know what the rabbis of Kabbalah say? Don't tell anybody you're saying things from Kabbalah. We'll keep it a secret. It's hard to keep it a secret with video cameras and tape recorders, but as much as we can. You know what the rabbis tell us, Ki ravu? You know what Rav means? Rav is an abbreviation. Ruth, Boaz. Rav, Ruth, Boaz. That's what Balak was scared of. He was scared of the Jewish people, not because we were numerous. Kiravu. He was worried about that union of Ruth and Boaz. And he knew that if that union is going to happen, it's going to bring devastation not only to his nation, but to all the nations of the world, and the Jewish people are going to prosper. So he waged a war. It was a preemptive strike. He didn't wait until later on in history. He said, let me get them now so Ruth will never be taken out of captivity. I'm saying it in a very oversimplified way. One day, God willing, you'll ask your rabbis to explain it to you in depth how this works exactly, but I'm giving you just to stretch your brains a little, that you should know there's so much depth behind the scenes over here, that when Ruth eventually crossed over to our side, don't think it was so easy. There was tremendous resistance. There was wars fought over this holy soul, that it shouldn't come to our side. Anything that's precious and important, there's going to be tremendous resistance, and the sides of evil are going to go try to suppress it. This was one example of that. Can I give you another interpretation along the same lines? Listen to what he says, Balak. Ata yelachachu hakahal et kol sevivotenu. I'm going to read that in English, so I give you the proper reading. Now the congregation, referring to the Jews, the congregation, will lick up our entire surroundings. Simply it means, Balak is scared, the Jews are going to come along, they're going to eat us up. They're going to lick up and swallow us all up. And the way he refers to us is the congregation, the kahal. It's a funny way of referring to us. So, you refer to a congregation of people in a synagogue, it's called the kahal maybe. But when you talk to a nation, usually we're not referred to as a kahal, as a congregation. What does he mean over here? The congregation is going to come up and lick all our surroundings. So let me explain to you the depth over here. As I mentioned to you earlier, we are not allowed to accept Moavi converts because they were ungrateful people. You know what the language of the Torah is? Lo yavo Moavi b'khal Hashem. A Moavi cannot come into the congregation of God. But our rabbis tell us that's only referring to the men. We are allowed to accept Moavi women into the congregation. And that was a ruling that the rabbis made many years ago. And because of that ruling, that allowed Ruth, the Moabite convert, to marry Boaz. Which means that legal ruling that says Ruth can come into the kahal, into the congregation, that allowed her marriage to become legalized. You know what Balak was saying? We have this soul surrounded. Like a thorn surrounds the rose. Balak was saying, our forces of evil have this holy soul protected. But what's going to happen? The Jews one day are going to come with their rule of the kahal. That rule of that a Moavi lady can come into the congregation and they're going to lick up all our forces of evil that are surrounding this holy rose. And they're going to take her out of captivity and they're going to legalize a marriage and we're going to be doomed because of it. Ata now yilachachu kahal, that law of kahal, that law of congregation that says that the Moabite converts can come into the congregation, that's going to lick up all our borders that we're trying to protect the soul from exiting. And he was right. So therefore we tried to make this preemptive strike. And as a result, when Bil'am eventually blessed the Jewish people, Bil'am prophesied about the coming of the Mashiach. What he was trying to tell Balak was, you failed. You had a good idea. But eventually, Ruth is going to escape from this captivity. And then he says in his blessings, listen and I quote, this is from our enemy. He says like this, Ar'enu velo'ata. I see him, but he's not here yet. That's referring to David HaMelech. Ashurenu, I vision him, velo karov, but he's not close. Ze Mashiach. Darach kochav miYaakov, there's a star that's going to emerge from Yaakov. Ze David. V'kam shevet v'Yisrael, and a tribe is going to rise up in the Jewish nation. Ze Melech HaMashiach. He prophesies about the coming of the Mashiach and redemption. Exactly what Balak was trying to suppress. He failed. So this wasn't only a war of physical, killing Goyim, killing Jews. He was actually trying to kill our future. That's the danger that we were in. If Balak would succeed, Ruth's holy soul would never have exited the captivity. She would never have been able to come into the congregation. She would never have been able to marry Boaz. And hence, the Messianic era would have been ruined. Dear ladies, if you remember a few weeks ago, I spoke to you about the 13 principles of our religion. I think we talked about at that time the obligation to believe in prophecy and to believe in Moshe Rabbeinu. I would please remind you all, if you can get your hands on that recording, it is important to listen to it and review it. Not because I said it, because it's the words of the Rambam that I was quoting, and these principles are vital. You cannot be considered religious as a Jew unless you have full belief in these 13 principles of faith. Today I want to discuss another principle with you. Rambam writes, you must believe in the coming of the Mashiach. And even though he has been delayed for thousands of years, you are not allowed to give up hope. As the Pasuk says, Bechol Yom Ahakelo, I will wait for him. Even though he's delayed, even though there's been great interruption in his coming, but still Ahakelo, you must anticipate his arrival. And we pray for this in the Amidah, whether it's in the Berakat Tishkon Betoch Yerushalayim, we pray for the building of Jerusalem, whether it's in the Berakat Etzemach David, where we pray to God that we are anticipating his arrival every moment. And our tradition tells us that it's going to come a descendant of David HaMelech, and he's going to become the leader of not only the Jewish people, but he's going to become the accepted leader of the entire world, and they're all going to accept him. And in his time he's going to make what's called kibbutz galuyot. He's going to take all the exilees that are in the different nations, and he's going to bring them all back to Eretz Yisrael. He's going to be the collector of all the exilees. There's going to be a great bet din that is going to be set up in his time, a court. There's going to be the reconstruction of the third temple on the Temple Mount today, where there's a mosque that's going to leave, and the temple either is going to come down from heaven according to the Zohar, or Mashiach's going to construct it himself. He's going to be a great king, and he's going to lead us in wars. And the Jewish people are going to be very successful in his time. And anybody that does not believe that there's going to be a Mashiach and a Redeemer, he is denying the entire Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu. Because our Torah predicts that there's going to come a time where the Jewish people are going to be redeemed. Now we're not certain exactly what's going to happen during those times, and nobody should be bothered exactly for this schedule. It's not a trip where you get an itinerary that at 9 o'clock this is going to happen, and 9:15 meet over here, and at 9:30 we're going to have breakfast. Nobody, even the biggest planner, cannot exactly give us the schedule and the itinerary of what's going to happen when Mashiach comes. We're not sure. Even Rambam wasn't sure. And Rambam writes, don't think about it too much. All you have to believe is he's going to come. When he comes, you'll see what happens. It doesn't pay to argue what's going to happen. It's just important just to accept it, and when it happens, it'll happen. There's going to be a war of Gog and Magog. I don't want to scare anybody, but it says there's going to be a great war at that time as well. There's going to be the prophet Eliyahu HaNavi is going to also surface at that time as well. Where do we stand in our generation regarding the Messianic era? Recently, I have been informed of one of the great rabbis of Israel that supposedly, and whenever you tell these stories, I have to say supposedly because I didn't hear it from the rabbi himself, even though it has been confirmed by his son and his daughter that this story happened. Rabbi, if I'm not mistaken, by the name of Rabbi Zon, He's well known, elderly fellow. He learned by the Hafetz Chaim. And supposedly the Hafetz Chaim came to him in a dream recently, and he told him that Mashiach is very close. Prepare and publicize. That is very significant. The Hafetz Chaim in his generation said that he is not going to see Mashiach, but his grandchildren are going to see the Mashiach. The Hafetz Chaim has a grandson today living in Israel that we're very close to, Rabbi Zaks. Rabbi Hillel Zaks, direct grandson of the Hafetz Chaim. He's an elderly gentleman. And he told me, he says, the Hafetz Chaim said he's going to come in my lifetime. He says, I'm not 30 years old, he said. He's an older man. But I want to read you a Gemara today, ladies. Many of you know about the Daf Yomi program that has swept not only the Jewish community, but our community as well. So many members of our community have been studying a page of Talmud every single day. This Shabbat, we're going to finish Gemara Sotah. Gemara Sotah is 49 pages. I want to read to you what it says on page 49. You're getting a preview. The men didn't learn this yet. They're going to learn it tomorrow. You're going to get it today. So when they say, oh, we learned that, we know that. The rabbi told us already on Friday. This is a very important Mishnah. The Mishnah tells us the telltale signs of what the world is going to look like before Mashiach comes. So we have to look at the signs, and we have to see if the signs are there, then we know we're close. Be'ekvot Mashiach, chutzpah yasgeh. Insolence will increase. You know what chutzpah is? Chutzpah is brazenness. It's like an arrogance. There has been no generation that exemplifies this prediction. Our generation is the generation of chutzpah. Chutzpah manifests itself in many ways. Just think 30, 40, 50, even 60 years ago, the way students would respect their teachers. Just think when you were in school, the respect that you had for your teachers. When a teacher would walk into a public school, the children would stand up, they would rise out of respect. Today a teacher walks into a room, they pull out a gun. Chutzpah yasgeh, tremendous chutzpah. Just think of yourselves, the way you respected your parents and grandparents, and look at our children today. Nothing that they did wrong, but they were born into this generation of chutzpah, of brazenness. Look at the brazenness of dress code. It's a chutzpah of the highest order. Just the styles and the ways. Chutzpah yasgeh is great disrespect, blatant brazenness. That is our generation. Today in this country, a person could take the flag of the United States of America and burn it on Fifth Avenue. There's no recourse. I would be willing to bet 50 years ago you'd get thrown in jail if you did that. But today, you can do anything, get away with anything. Brazenness, chutzpah. I'm embarrassed to tell you, this chutzpah is not only by the Goyim, it's by the Jews as well. Every single year throughout this country, there are parades that people that have all sorts of perverted lifestyles, where in previous generations they were embarrassed of such a lifestyle, where they would lock themselves in a closet. And today, chutzpah, they come along and march in the streets as if they're regular and things are coming to them and they have rights and have equality. This is the epitome of chutzpah, where a pervert can come along and walk in the middle of the street and say, I'm normal like everybody else. Such an arrogance. And I'm embarrassed to say that they did the same thing in Eretz Yisrael recently. Such a parade happened in the holy city of Yerushalayim, Kodesh. Just a hop, skip, and a jump away from the holy Kotel HaMa'arabi, the Western Wall. Chutzpah, who would believe it in the city of Jerusalem? Where there's a question if he even allowed to have music in the city of Jerusalem, because we mourn the destruction of our temple. And to have such a brazen attack. Nobody would ever dream of such a thing. Yeah, maybe in the metropolis of Tel Aviv and the other places, but in Jerusalem, our generation, the generation of arrogance, of chutzpah. But let's look at some of the other telltale signs. If you're not certain yet that we're in the time. Ve'yoker ya'amir, and the costs will soar. There's going to be great inflation. If anybody has any question on this, just in the matter of a few months, look at what has happened to an economy in the United States. This is something that we have to be very concerned about. In a matter of a few months, gas prices have doubled. Unprecedented. I was in the supermarket yesterday in Brooklyn. Don't think I do the shopping. I'm not such a tzaddik. I was buying myself a soda probably. In any event, so I was standing online. There was a righteous lady from the community. She says, Rabbi, we have to do something. What do we have to? What's the problem? She says, a half a gallon of milk costs $3.10. I said, the truth, what did it cost? I don't know what it cost. She says, last year was $1.50. How can it be? What's happening, Rabbi? Bread, wheat, inflation. Prices are going to soar at that time. And then the Mishnah says something very, very telling. Hagefen teten pirya v'hayayin b'yoker. Normally there's a law of supply and demand. Usually when there's a shortage of an item, the item becomes expensive. But the Mishnah says that the high prices in the time of the Mashiach is not necessarily going to be about demand or supply. There's going to be great supply of grapes, but the wine is still going to be expensive. And a lot of the economists are saying the same thing. It's not that there's a shortage of oil. There's a lot of oil. There's enough oil that could last for hundreds of years. We have oil in this country. But even though there's supply, but a lot of the price is going to be manipulated for other factors, whether it's traders or whatever the other reason why the price is going to go high. And look what the Mishnah then says. Umalchut ta'afech leminut. The governments are going to turn to atheism. Governments across the world, including the government of this country. I want you to know that when this country was founded, it was founded on the principles of God. The founding fathers, Washington, Jefferson, these were religious people. Do you know that there was a movement at the time that they should make the language of this country the official language Hebrew? Because they felt that's the biblical language. And if you look at throughout the country, the names of the cities, they're all biblical. Throughout every state, there's biblical cities. Bethlehem, Goshen, a lot of cities that actually are written in the Torah. But today, we have a government, not only in this country, but throughout the world, that has turned to atheism, separation of church and state. It's forbidden to even pray to a God in the school. It's forbidden to have the 10 Commandments hanging in front of a courthouse. It becomes already a breach of church and state, where people can sue department stores if they even put greetings of a holiday in their windows. There's a movement just to eradicate God from anywhere in the government. Today it has been said that the only place where you can find God is on a dollar bill. And that's unfortunate. It was not always like that. The meeting places will be used for harlotry. What is this referring to? Our rabbis tell us these meeting places are places of higher or education. Today, places of education, whether it's the colleges or the universities, places where people are supposed to get together to study intellect, schools, they have turned to places of harlotry, the Mishnah says. Look what's going on the college campuses. All the different crimes between the genders, between the boys and the girls. You people are savvy, you listen to the news of the teenage pregnancies in the schools across the country, an epidemic. These are places of education. It's going to be places where there's going to be immorality. In the olden days, used to be there were separate schools in the public school system, or separate entrances at least. Boys would go in from one side, girls go in from another side. Today, the places of education are going to turn into places of znut. This is our generation. Then Mishnah predicts Galil Yehirav. The Galil, that's the Galilee. I was just there a few days ago. Is going to be destroyed. We have our enemy Syria and Lebanon hurling rockets over into the Galilee, where it is desolate. I can't go through all of them, but if you read every single one, listen to this, what it says. Ne'arim penei zekenim yalbinu. The youth will blanch the faces of elders. Zekenim ya'amdu mipnei ketanim. Elders will stand in front of their youth. I remember when I was young, when we used to go to a seven on Shabbat, if an elderly person would come into the room, we'd all stand up right away. We were all embarrassed. How can you watch an elderly person standing? We'd all stand up and run to the side, let the older person sit. See if that happens today in our generation. The youth has no shame. Go on the subway. You see, the youth sitting and the old man standing holding on. Nobody moves. And if somebody gets up, they think he's crazy. What are you getting up for? A generation that has no respect for its elders. A man's enemy are the people of his household, fighting within families, disputes, intra-family disputes. The son is not abashed in the presence of his father. And in this generation, we can only rely on our Father in heaven. Because the problems are going to be so great, no human being is going to be able to solve them. It's going to be a generation that the only solution is going to be, we can only rely on our Father in heaven. Do I have to tell you, for how many generations are they trying to make peace in the Middle East? And however many accords they have signed, and however many peace treaties they have signed, and however many roadmaps, we're still in the same position, we're still in the same place, maybe it got worse. The only solution in the time of Mashiach is going to be, we can only rely on God. When that happens, where people are going to say we can only rely on God, then you know Mashiach is coming close. And we've reached that level where even the pundits and the experts have said, we need a miracle, we can only rely on God. Once already the people are starting to talk like that we need God, know that Mashiach is close. And therefore, dear ladies, the telltale signs are here. There's no question about it. What does it mean to us? Nobody gets scared. There's not to scare you. I don't know why people hear Mashiach, they get scared. Mashiach's not the boogeyman. It's a good thing. It's a great thing. Nobody likes change, maybe. Everybody's know what's going to happen. Everything's going to be good for us, Bezat Hashem. But you have to be prepared for it. And part of the preparation is making teshuvah. I just was in Israel for a few days. And I had the merit to go to some of the great rabbis of Israel, both living and deceased. And there's definitely a tremendous feeling that something is percolating here. Something is happening today in the world as we see it. In Israel, where the dollar used to be so strong, today the dollar is a cursed currency in Israel. It is devaluated by 30%. So if a person had $1 a few months ago was worth $1, today it's only worth 70 cents. So if somebody the rabbi received a donation of $100, now it's only worth 70. They're struggling tremendously in Eretz Yisrael with this currency fluctuation. You think gas is a problem by us? A liter of gasoline in Israel is $8 a gallon. As well in London and Europe, which has been met for years like that. There's something, Yoker Yamin, inflation, that's a sign. And the Gemara always talks about the year after the Shemitah cycle. We're in a Shemitah cycle this year. Always be aware of the year after the Shemitah, the Gemara says. That's also a significant time. And that's what Balak was trying to stop. Kirabu, he was trying to break the Ruth and Boaz union. He was trying to stop the Messianic era. We are so lucky, ladies, that we are in this generation. Somebody asked me, and I'll conclude, Rabbi, if the Mashiach didn't come in the previous generations that there were great tzaddikim, is going to come in our generations? We don't come to their toenails. And I answered to them precisely that. Those earlier generations do not have our tests. There has been no generation that has been tested like ours. The Yetzer Hara is so strong in our generation. And if you ladies are still able to come to classes with all the competition that's outside, and our children are still going to synagogue, with all the Yetzer Hara that's there and so available. A person wants to commit a sin today, he could just take out his phone, he could just open up, it's right there, everything's in front of him, it's all there. And therefore, since the tests of this generation are that great, the reward is that much greater. That if we're overcoming it, God bless you all you modest ladies that are here. Your test is 1,000-fold that it was 100 years ago or 200 years ago. I mean, 200 years ago, even the most immodest people would wear robes and hats and helmets and whatever they wore on the street. That was the fad. That was the fashion. Today, you have a much greater test. Therefore, God says, for them to do it, it was easy, but for you to do it, it's much harder. Therefore, God will send the Mashiach in our generation. Because for us to remain religious and devoted, look at the addiction, look at the drugs, look at the perversions, look at the society. We have a hard time even maintaining our own community. Even our own community is beginning to unravel a little at the seams. It's hard to keep everybody with Shabbat. It's hard to keep everybody with the proper way, with kashrut and all these tefillin every day. It's hard. It's become very difficult. And we give the community the benefit of the doubt. The tests are that great. And if you are able to be a warrior, and in the face of such trials and tribulations still maintain the faith and be religious in observance, God says, these people are better than the previous generations. Yes, the great rabbis, they had tests, but nothing, it pales in comparison to what we're going through today. And therefore we should be very happy and excited that when Mashiach comes, we're going to be able to say we had little to do with it. And the rabbis of the previous generation are going to come along and congratulate us. How'd you do it? Who knows if they were living in this generation if they would be as great as they were. It's impossible. And therefore everybody should be strong. Everybody should be hazak, everybody should be committed. Whether that dream of the Hafetz Chaim is true or not, we don't give too much credence to dreams always. But if a Mishnah tells us that these are the signs, and the signs are all there, and much more than I didn't read to you, let us all make teshuvah. Let us recommit ourselves to our principles. At the end of the game, hold on a little more, you have to hold on. That's it. You have to make it a little more. The rope is almost finished. It's not like you have to be religious for the next 2,000 years. A little more, you have to hold on, and then he's going to come, then it's over. But don't give up at the end. If somebody lets go of the rope, they're going to say, you couldn't hold on for a little more. He's right around the corner, you let go. And then Be'ezat Hashem, Borei Olam, what Balak wasn't able to do to us, and Bil'am wasn't able to do to us, because God protects us, Borei Olam, Be'ezat Hashem, will reunite that union of Ruth and Boaz. And their descendant, the descendant of David, Mashiach bin Yosef and Mashiach bin David, Be'ezat Hashem, will manifest in our time in Rabbi. Amen. Amen.